Welcome back. You're watching Signature Morning on Signature Television. Of course, now we are going to be discussing the return of the oil subsidy. Oil subsidy, of course, has been one major talking point across Nigeria, especially as it concerns oil and gas in the last 60 years. And it does not look like it's going to go away anytime soon, just like successive government try to remove it. It tends to affect virtually everything in our life. But the current administration, while it took over office on May 29th, 2023, says subsidy is gone. But very recently, it returned subsidy. And one wonders really, what is this subsidy and how are we getting all of these right? We have with us an oil and gas experts to help us dissect some of these issues as it relates to the return of fuel subsidy and the expectations of Nigerians. Chief Madaki Omadachi Ame is an oil and gas analyst. Good to have you, sir. Good morning.
Yes, good morning.
A pleasure speaking with you. I mean, again, you keep hearing this oil subsidy, and it sounds so weird in the ears. We've had several governments say, on undercurrents, the difference between what is imported and versus what is being received. I'm just wondering, can you just put it in perspective, what oil subsidy really is and why it is affecting the entire system in Nigeria?
Petroleum subsidy differential between the cost of landing the products and the cost at which it is said to be realistically sold at the pump. So, for instance, if the product lands at 1,000 naira per liter, and the government feels that Nigerians cannot pay 1,000 naira per liter, but that they should pay, let's say, 600 naira per liter, then the subsidy is that difference between the cost of landing the product and the cost at which the product is sold at the pump. So that has been the story that has been with us, for many decades, in this country.
But again, for a country
the
that
government is able to get it right.
yeah, for a country that owns the oil and also has refineries as its own, do you really think that we should be talking about subsidies?
Well, we've discussed this in different fora, ad infinitum. My position has always been that, there's no subsidy on any of the products in Nigeria, and that what they call subsidy is actually passing inefficient costs over to the Nigerian public. If we get the economics of the oil and gas sector right, there's absolutely no reason why we should be paying a dime as subsidy to anybody. But because it has become a source of money making, for those who are in the decision-making positions in NMPC and in the government, this continues to happen year in, year out. But just like you rightly said, for a country that produces the crude oil, there's absolutely no reason why anybody should be talking about subsidizing the product, because the product is yours, the end product is also yours. Even if you don't have refineries in country that are producing those products at the pump, then you can still do the pricing in such a way that it lands here and what people pay for it makes sense. But what we have done over the years is to inflict injury on ourselves by artificially buying the product from ourselves at an exorbitant price in the international market, which is completely artificial. Then because our refineries are never working, they are either being turned around or in the process of being turned around. Over the past 30 years, it's always been the same story. Every new group managing director of NMCC that comes sets a new date by which the refineries will work, and they never get to work. it's totally shameful, but that's what we have been living with all this while. So even if you are not refining in country, you should be able to price it properly by addressing the cost of the crude oil at the point of production. Because if you buy crude oil from yourself at an internationally determined price, where that market is operated by people who don't produce crude oil, then you will be buying at an artificial price. The cost of producing efficiently 1 barrel of crude oil should not, no matter how inefficient the operator is, should not exceed $10 at the maximum. In fact, studies have shown that the ideal cost of production of a barrel of crude oil in Nigeria should be anything between $4 and $5. And if it is so, and the international market is ready to pay $100 for the same barrel of crude oil that you produce at $5, why should you buy it at that international price and then start marking up the price of local consumption from that premise? You will never get the pricing right. But the problem with Nigeria is that those who are in decision-making positions assume an all-knowing posture. So they have blocked their minds to accepting new ideas. And in doing so, either deliberately or out of crass ignorance, they put the entire country into a painful situation where people are paying, through their noses, to buy petrol. And it's very painful because you see the long queues, orchestrated by inefficiency in the supply chain. And then just imagine that, people spend a day, 2 days in the petrol station, and when it gets to their turn to buy the petrol, they don't even have the money to buy enough to fill their tanks. Because it's a project these days to fill a tank of a Nigerian's car. It's actually a project. Okay. Depending on how big your car tank is, you can spend as much as 100,000, 120,000 naira buying petrol. That is not food. So why would the government deliberately inflict pain on its citizens, in this sort of inefficient manner when it can be solved so easily? That's the problem. And that's, it can only be an uncaring government that doesn't bother, about this, because the cost of petrol, the cost of diesel, the cost of kerosene affects the cost of everything else in this country. They tell us that, for long they have deregulated diesel and kerosene. That was also a very unfair thing to do because, all the pricings are supposed to be done together. And if you get the pricing of one product right, you get the pricing of all of them right in the chain. Because it's the same production process. So there's no reason why one should be much more expensive than the other. So we are here running inefficiently. People dress in nice, suits and kaftans and go to work in NMTC every day. But they do nothing. They actually just do not think clearly about how to run this. And the government is also, not bothered, or they don't know any better. So they just allow the citizenry to bear this pain, for nothing. And I think it's grossly unfair.
Okay. In tandem with what Charles earlier asked, so do you think, in your own opinion, is there like a consensus between the government and these people that Nigeria imports oil from? Because from what we could understand, for example, the Port Harcourt oil refinery was built and commissioned since 1965. However, this is just one of our many refineries. But these refineries aren't operational. They're not working. We keep hearing since 1965. So does it look like there is a plan, or I don't want to use the word cahoot, between the federal government or the government of the day and these people that we import oil from, such so that it decapacitates our own refinery from working, that is making them not to focus on reviving and putting it operational, our refineries?
Well, it's a multifaceted problem. The truth of the matter is, like everything Nigerian, people just look for how to make money off this country refinery is not rocket science. And the age of the refinery actually doesn't matter because some refineries in the world are over 100 years old. There's a refinery in India, that is over 120 years old and is still producing, and running efficiently up to today. So just like every mechanical process, you just keep renewing it, changing the components when they get old or obsolete. And then the thing keeps running. But in Nigeria, everything is made to look like a big deal. The process of refining crude oil is actually extremely simple. Artisanal refiners in the Niger Delta, do this routinely using crude technology, but they still get the products out. At the end of the day, the government refineries are always being turned around because of the people who are making money from the turnaround process. And nobody has ever gone to prison for this. If we run a country where there's consequence management for bad behavior, I think people will sit up and do an honest job for an honest day's pay. But here we are, people are just earning, taking as much money from the public purse as they want because they do not, they know that even when their behavior leads to gross losses for the country, nothing will happen to them. And that is why we are where we are today. There's no reason why, the 4 refineries in this country, 2 in Port Harcourt, 1 in Warri, and 1 in Kaduna, should not be operating optimally. But every single day we hear these stories. And people are there working, pretending to be working and collecting a salary, huge salaries every month. I hear that, their combined wage bill is anything in the region of about 10 billion naira on a monthly basis. People are collecting money for doing nothing, and they can go to bed at night and sleep well. Why the government is not holding people accountable, in my view, is also because the government is inept. Any self-respecting government that knows what they are doing should not be, continuing in this rigmarole that we are doing. So to answer your question directly, yes, it's shameful that our refineries never work. It's shameful that every new group managing director of NNPC who comes sets a new target for when the refineries will start working. And they usually set the target towards the end of their own tenure so that they will raise the expectations of Nigerians and say, well, just leave me to keep gallivanting in this my role. When I'm about to go, the refineries will work. And then when they don't work and they have left, everybody will say, well, the man has gone. Let's not go back into history. Let's look forward. It is that looking forward and doing nothing that has kept us where we are today. I think it's going to hold us down and keep us the way we are for quite some time to come. And it's very frustrating. It's really very painful that things can be done so much better, but we are where we are because, we are not being governed right, and nobody seems to care. Or even those who care, cannot do anything about it because we are stuck with what we have.
Right. There's several questions on my mind, really. I don't even know which one to put forth first. Every now and then we keep hearing the amount of modular refineries that have been destroyed. As at this morning, we heard about over 200 that was destroyed in one day. Do you think that modular refineries would help our fuel crisis? And how much so? If, for instance, somebody builds a modular refinery and then licensed it, do you think it will be in any way, help? Because I understand that competition can play a huge role in making fuel drop. As at this moment, we are not even sure whether it's only NNPC that has the sole authority to import fuel. I'm just wondering, really, from your own perspective, do you think that having modular refineries, many of them, if you have the monies to be able to build, you can come in and get, license? Do you think it can solve Nigeria's crisis in the fuel sector?
Well, it's all about demand and supply, and it's also about survival. If you go to Niger Delta, you will actually weep for this country because there's a lot of poverty in the midst of plenty. Many of the young men and a few young women who are into the business of, crude oil refining in a crude manner, which is through all, the local refining process, which catches fire a lot of times, kills a lot of them. And then when there is the national outrage After a few days, it peters out because other more competing news items, replace them. Are people who actually deserve to earn a living, by being citizens of this potentially great country. Now, what I think should happen, instead of the Navy and the Air Force busying themselves, with destroying artisanal refineries and celebrating it as if they are working, I think they need to stop that strategy, and they need to bring them out from the closet. They are doing this illegally because there is no legal pathway to getting it done. Nobody would like to carry out the criminal activity if there is a pathway to getting that same activity done legitimately. My own solution would be to form these people into cooperative societies, license them, and then give them legitimate access to crude oil through a process that is transparent, auditable, and sustainable. When you do that, you have created a livelihood for them. And they are doing this, with technology that you can import easily from countries like India and China and Japan. Because setting up a small modular refinery and allocating it to a cooperative society to run, is not rocket science. It's not difficult. And these modular refineries can be constructed fairly quickly and brought in and installed, and then they begin to work. So why would you allow your young people to drive themselves into desperation, by seeking a livelihood for themselves, in fact, risking their lives in the process of doing that, and then polluting the environment in such a nasty manner? If you go to any of those sites where this operation takes place, it's actually an eyesore. And it's even compounded by the bombings that the Air Force, in conjunction with the Navy does, in order to in their feeble effort to discourage this sort of activity. If you bring them out of the closet, you are, deepening the oil and gas industry in Nigeria by making more people involved in the process. You don't have to set up a Dangote refinery of 650,000 barrels capacity a day to be able to refine crude oil. At least the artisanal refiners in the Niger Delta have demonstrated that consistently. And they are quite resilient. They risk being bombed to death, they risk being killed, their equipment risk being destroyed, by overzealous security agents who think they are doing some work, but actually they are not doing anything useful as far as I'm concerned. They are just doing those things to attract headlines. We have Boko Haram in the north, terrorizing the whole country. We have all manner of insurgents all over the place, messing people up and engaging the security agencies. If they know what they are doing, that's where they should be deploying their energies, and not to go chasing, people who are struggling for a livelihood, around and destroying the environment in the process and reporting such nasty behavior, as if they are, they are doing something useful. And why the government continues to condone that kind of bad behavior is what I cannot understand. Why don't we deploy our, military might better in a more efficient manner to secure the country, secure farmers as they go to the farms, ensure that people don't get kidnapped on the road, like the medical students who were a whole busload of medical students in Benue, were kidnapped a few days ago, and for over a week now, nobody has been able to locate where they are, and we are running the country. At the end of the day, people will pretend that they are doing some work and they're in the security agencies, but nobody sees their effectiveness. Is this their life? Is this how we are going to continue to run this country? At the end of the day, somebody's face is presiding over the country. It's a joke, as far as I'm concerned. I think that we're not getting our priorities right. We're not putting our emphasis in the right direction, and we need to be able to think completely outside the box on how to solve the problems of the oil and gas sector in Nigeria, because it should remain the mainstay of the country. But this is a sector, Nigeria is the only country in the world that posts losses from its oil and gas sector. Recently NMPC announced some phony, paper profits, which they now quickly said they were deploying, towards payment of subsidy. You as a company, you announce the profit. Your investors, your shareholders are supposed to be happy that your company has finally become profitable. And the same say that even before announcing the profit, we have gone to the presidency to seek and obtain an approval, which in my view is completely unconstitutional and highly illegal. For the president in one fell swoop to just say, okay, fine, use 3.3 trillion that you have declared as profit to pay subsidy. This is the same subsidy that this government said they have removed since May 29th, 2023. So if you remove the subsidy on May 29th, 2023, and you throw the entire country into the sort of pain we are going through right now, how can you then come and say you're authorizing NMTC, to use whatever profit they think they have made from their operations to pay subsidy? Which subsidy are you paying? 3.3 trillion. Come on. This place is being run like a joke. And it's actually extremely painful, and we're getting exasperated about this.
Okay. In an attempt to narrow down to the root cause of this, or actually exhume it, whatever that this oil saga has to do with. We understand that the Port Harcourt refinery alone produces 60,000 barrels per day. One also can produce 150,000 barrels per day. That's 24,000 cubic meters per stream day. And the Kaduna can have a capacity of 50,000 barrels per day, whilst the Warri refinery has a capacity of 125,000 barrels per day. However, we find out that most of these our oil reserved is under the control of foreign corporations. Why do you think that is with us?
Well, many years ago, when the oil industry was at its infancy, the government entered into joint venture arrangements with the big oil companies, the international oil companies, Shell, Total, Ajit, before the recently, and Exxon Mobil. Now they entered into the joint ventures because we didn't have the indigenous technology to work these fields, and the joint ventures gave different percentages, to the operators, and so that's what we're still running. Eventually, when it was found that the government didn't have enough money to finance their own share of the equity in the joint venture, they came up with the production sharing contract, where the operator runs the entire operations at their own costs and recover the cost of production from oil and gas when it's found, and sold commercially in the market. So the current situation, is not unusual. That's the model that's used for production in most other countries in the world. Even though over time, the countries that took themselves seriously, like Brazil, Saudi Arabia, and a few other places, got their national oil companies to become sufficiently robust to run these operations themselves, and then they clawed back at the joint ventures and became the major operators. That's why Saudi Aramco is probably the biggest oil company in the world right now, because they produce entirely by themselves, and Saudi Aramco came on stream just around the same time that NMTC came on stream. That's if NMTC is not even a bit older than Saudi Aramco. And then we have Petrobras in Brazil, we have Petronas, we have a number of national oil companies that have taken the responsibility away from the international oil companies. But here in Nigeria, the international oil companies still have their own equity crude, which they can sell to recover, to make their own profits, because at the end of the day, they are in a venture where they are supposed to also be making money. And so when we hear about domestic crude oil supply obligations and the fact that the IOCs and NMTC should consign crude oil to Dangote refinery and any other local refinery that is ready to produce, the question you ask yourself is that where is the crude going to come from? If I am an international oil company and I have, let's say 30 or 40% equity interest in the venture I'm working, that means that 40% of the crude or 30% of the crude, as the case may be, is supposed to be mined on a daily basis. And then you ask me by fiat to consign that crude that is already mined, that I and to give it to a refinery because it's a local refinery. I'll simply tell you no, that my parent company also has their own refinery in South Africa, in other parts of Europe, and I did my duty to send, that portion of the crude that's mine, to those refineries for them to do with it as they please, because that's their own share of the venture. Because they pay royalties, they pay other kinds of taxes, petroleum profit tax and all that. So at the end of the day, why are we running this way? And why have we not built capacity over the past 50 to 60 years that we have had this, industry running and thriving here in this country? Again, it's because of the same fleet. The people who work in the oil companies, the people who run NMPC are richer than the country because they are making more money, on a daily basis than Nigeria can ever hope to make from this same crude. By selling our crude oil at a loss, NMPC posts profits. The recent announcement of how much they have made, as profit is actually cannot stand the test of scrutiny. Nobody believes them anymore. You get the point. So whatever figures they reel out from wherever they are, I just figure that people just take with a pinch of salt. And government should not be run in that manner. People should be transparent. Government should ensure that whatever information comes from them is consistent, auditable, and becomes polished. But the way it is right now, the government says one thing, and does another. The president, in his recent speech to Nigerians after the End Bad Governance protest, or rather during the End Bad Governance protest, made a categorical statement that subsidy is no more. But a few days later, an agency of government comes and says that the same president has authorized them to use proceeds of the business of oil and gas in Nigeria to pay subsidy. So how can the president in one breath say subsidy has been removed since May 29th, and then that same president authorizes the National Oil Company to spend their entire, supposed profits to pay subsidy? That's a clear contradiction, which ought never to come from that level of governance. So that's why, there's a lot of trust deficit between the citizens and the government. People don't believe the government anymore. Whatever they say, they just say, well, they've said what they have to say. Because whatever policy pronouncements come from government, is not well thought out. It's just a statement of convenience made for that immediate moment, and which is immediately forgotten as soon as it is made. Governance is not done that way, and we have to change the entire structure of the way this country is governed. By ensuring that competent, people are put in the right places to make policy for this country, especially in the key sectors of the economy. But that's not been done. Appointments are made based on cronyism, based on, who do you know, based on what is the perception, of those who are the appointing authority. So at the end of the day, you have very incompetent people playing very key roles in this economy. And that's why we are held down. That's why we are the way we are. And I think the entire world laughs at us. Every time we keep talking of the potential of Nigeria, but at 64, this country should no longer be talking of potential. We should be talking of reality. But, look at us. Just look at the governance of this country.
Yeah, I mean, these days they don't call it subsidy anymore. I think there's a new word they call it. Is it under payment?
Under recovery.
Under recovery.
Head of under recovery, head of shortfall. There's nothing that has not been used, but again, it is what it is, as Donald Trump would say. At the end of the day, whether you like it or not, it is money going out that ought not to go out.
Absolutely.
It is money that can be saved, by doing the right things. I keep saying it. If we apply the right principles of petroleum economics to our oil and gas sector, there's no reason why a liter of petrol should not be 200 naira. There's no reason, and it should still be profitable. There's no reason why a liter of diesel should not be 200 naira. There's no reason why a liter of kerosene should not be 200 naira. All the products sold at the pump can be sold clearly under 300 naira, even today. You get the point? We have a lot of challenges that are extraneous, to the process, but they are also self-inflicted. The current exchange rate of the naira to the dollar is extremely, extremely artificial and completely shameful. You get the point? Right. But it keeps deteriorating on a daily basis. The fundamentals have not changed. 1,000 naira within the space of 1 year.
Yes.
Because we're at war or what? But there are people managing this whole process on a day-to-day basis and they're still congratulating themselves and really not achievements, in quote. What is it? And when are we going to get the act right and then run this country efficiently? The knowledge is there, the people to get it done are there, but nobody cares. Nobody listens to those who are supposed to make policy for this country, and it's really, really, really painful.
All right. How much of a game changer do you think that the arrival of the Dangote refinery would really make? A lot of people have said that what is happening to Dangote right now is probably few persons who are gaining from this so-called subsidy scam are the ones trying to stop Dangote, from getting the crude in naira. Some others have also said that Dangote did not do his job very well, his due diligence as to, where to get his crude at the end of the construction of the so-called Dangote refinery. I don't know if you feel, if you have that sentiment as to which side of it will tilt. Then secondly, if Dangote refinery is allowed to come on board, what changes specifically and significantly would it have in our oil and gas sector?
Yeah, thanks. I think that's an excellent question. The decision of any investor to site a project of that magnitude anywhere is a mix of several factors. I believe that, Dangote has done well in terms of investing locally. And setting up the biggest single train oil refinery in the world in Nigeria should ordinarily be a plus for Nigeria. And in an unconstrained environment, that should be able to leapfrog the economy. First of all, we're supposed to see the savings, that come from having that right here, because the cost of shipment outwards of the crude and the cost of shipment inwards of the crude should at least be removed from the process. It should also have multiplier effects in terms of creating employment, for our many highly qualified engineers, and people who should be working in the oil and gas sector, but who are right now doing nothing. The third impact should actually be on foreign exchange. There's no reason why a refinery that is locally located here should be buying crude oil in dollars. In fact, there's nothing sacrosanct about the currency in which crude oil is traded. So I've always advocated that, crude oil should always be sold in naira, to at least those who are refining locally. You get the point. And that will help to strengthen the naira, and it will also help to drastically reduce the pressure, that is put on the naira, because the demand for naira is now exacerbated, by the amount of dollar that is required to bring in finished products. But all of those ones are meant to be saved, by the location of the Dangote refinery. And hopefully, when the NMTC refineries finally begin to work, if they ever get to work. But having said that, the refinery business is completely a business venture that is supposed to be all-encompassing, and it's just a process of getting crude, putting it through one part of the refinery and getting the refined products out on the other side, through a catalytic cracking process, which is not rocket science. But the point I make is that, local production of crude oil, even though it's a good parameter for determining location of refineries, should not even be a factor. And a good example is Singapore. Singapore has close to 40 active refineries that are operating in Singapore. But they do not produce a single barrel of crude oil. They import their crude oil from countries like Nigeria, countries in the Middle East, other places, where they get crude for cheap, refine, and they make a multiple of the money they use to buy the crude, from selling the refined products. So, if you site a refinery, one of the first things you must think about is who are the suppliers of the crude. And, if we remove the sensationalism from all of this crude supply chain, and domestic crude sale obligation, international product. And then, supply, pass it through your refinery and get it done. So when all of this hue and cry about, IOCs and NFPC not wanting to sell crude oil to Dangote and all that, was on, I was probably one of the first people to put my voice on the side of regulation. Because when the Dangote MD, the Indian MD, the person I'm talking about, the guy who runs the Dangote refinery, when he came up and made that comment, that the regulator, that's the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Regulatory Authority, was actually licensing, importers of petroleum products who were importing, adulterated products. I think that was actually a very wrong move, and there should have been dire consequences for those kind of comments because the implications are severe. It can lead to class actions. Nigerians can go to court and say, that the government is deliberately, fueling, ill health in the country, causing cancer, and all of that. Those are not the kind of comments we make lightly. And I think that those comments were made in a completely anti-competitive environment. There's a big Dangote refinery which is supposed to have taken off, which has already taken off and even exporting products. But at the end of the day, they want a free territory, where nobody else competes with them effectively. And I think that's not right. With competition, things are supposed to improve. Look at what's happening in the telecom sector. Because all the other companies are allowed to compete freely. Every day you get news from the individual oil and gas, individual telecoms companies, and the prices keep coming down. If we have a monopoly in the oil and gas sector, then it doesn't matter whether the refinery is located here or not. Nigerians will still be shortchanged for it. And I think, we need to have a more holistic approach to this whole thing. You have decided to set up a refinery. It's just like setting up a brewery. You set up your brewery to produce alcohol. Then you should have thought through where you're going to get your wheat, barley, corn, whatever you're going to use to produce, the beer, from. And you should not go and be arguing that all the local production of those things, those inputs must be channeled to your brewery. Otherwise, the economy will collapse. It shouldn't be like that. Every private business should survive or die, based on what they are able to do and how their management is thinking around how the business will be run.
Thank you so much, Chief Madaki.
This idea of, shut everybody else down so that I can be the only one making money, has been our bane and has been the problem all this while. We shouldn't allow it.
Thank you so much, Chief Madaki. Many thanks for your input on the matter concerning, in regards to our oil and gas sector of Nigeria. It's something that's prevalent, and we will continue this issue. We'll continue to discuss as it unfolds. Thank you so much, Chief Madaki Omadachi Ame. Thank you so much once again.
The pleasure is all mine. Anytime.
Okay, right now we will go for a break, and when we come back, we will still continue talking on the issues that bothers the nation, and of course, it has a way it has a ripple effect on the global world. Do stay with us.